Welcome to Wicked Weather. I'm your host, Peter Lavasco. It is 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. Let's see. Let's talk about a little bit of the weather around here. Got a little bit of rain coming down. It's kind of cool and raw up here in New England. We've been watching a front moving in from the west, and that's going to move offshore. I have a great guest coming up for you tonight. I got Rob Goutreau. Rob is a meteorologist, and also ghost, I guess you could call him a ghost hunter, a ghost medium, and an author. He's got 3 great books that are out there, and he'll explain all of them to you as soon as he calls in, which I'm hoping he'll be calling in very shortly. And that's really about it. So I want to thank my sponsors for allowing us to have the show tonight. Rolling Hills Asylum in Batavia, New York. Again, it's always on the bucket list. And again, Fort Williams Henry in Lake George, New York. Okay, well, I think we have my guest calling in now, so let's get Rob.
Hey, Peter. How are you?
Good. How you doing, Rob?
Doing very well, thank you.
Thanks for coming on my show tonight. I really appreciate it. There's one thing I wanted to say before the show starts. Last night, I went out all around Cape Ann trying to see these Aurora Borealis lights. I posted it on Facebook. I posted it on Twitter. I talked to a few friends with scientists, and they told me that there's a really good chance of viewing. But you know what screwed it all up? It was the full moon. It was too bright, and I think they were just to our north. Although I did see a few white streaks of dancing through the sky, but very, very faint. Did you guys get to witness any of that down in Maryland?
No, it was cloudy last night.
It was cloudy down there last night?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we didn't really get that much up here. All right, guys, this is Rob Goutreau. Listeners, this is Rob Goutreau. He is a meteorologist, ghost medium, I guess you could say ghost investigator as well, and he's an author. Rob, tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you involved in meteorology at an earlier date in your life?
Well, basically, it all goes back to the blizzard of 1978, right there in New England, which is where I'm from. I was so impressed by that storm. I actually remember snowdrifts, probably about 6 feet high, all the way up to the top of a street sign.
Wow!
And I think the city and school were closed for about 2 weeks. So I was just totally amazed by the power of that. And then I remember Hurricane Gloria. I think that was in 1978. And Hurricane Bella in 1976. So yep. I think the compilation of those 3 weather events really got me interested in the weather.
Right. I think Hurricane Gloria was 1988.
Oh, that's right, 88. Sorry. Yes.
That's all right. You're making us get old too quick. So the blizzard of 78 got you all into wanting to become a meteorologist. There was nothing else that you experienced as a kid growing up that brought you into the field that you wanted to become a professional in?
No, there really wasn't any other big storm or big factor other than the fact that I liked warning people and trying to understand what was happening. I remember being very afraid of thunderstorms as a kid. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a wise thing to do. Now that I look back at it. We should be, because a bolt of lightning is about 10,000 degrees hotter than the surface of the sun.
Right. So. Yeah. I was never scared of thunderstorms. Maybe in my early years, maybe 5, 6 years old, I'd hide under the bed or go in the closet. But that's not going to help you. You know what I mean?
No, not really.
But so as far as that goes, so you were the blizzard of 78 got you all involved into the weather, which is great. Did you follow anybody as a child growing up? Did you have a favorite station that you watched or a favorite meteorologist that you looked up to?
Gosh, I'm going to date myself right here. I remember following Don Kent.
I love Don Kent.
Yeah. And Bruce Schwegler.
Oh my God, Rob, those are my two best back then. Bruce Schweigler was awesome. He was so into it, and being a meteorologist, being inside forecasting, you don't get to go outside and experience while you're on air telling people live what's going on. So that's one thing that they get to miss out on. Although once in a while they get to go outside, and enjoy it and observe what's going on in the weather field. Another great one you bring up, Don Kent. Don Kent he was fantastic. I remember that day. I think it was in 1981 or 1982. He was predicting a snowstorm that was going to go out to sea, and we were all bummed out because it was a Thursday night and we were going to go to school the next day. Rob? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
I thought I lost you. All right. And he was going to go. And we had school the next day on Friday morning, so we were planning on, hopefully missing school. Well, that storm that went out to sea didn't, and we woke up in the morning with over a foot of snow, so that was great. So sometimes they can be wrong as far as predictions go in New England, forecasting New England storms. So.
And much to the happiness of the students.
Yeah, we were all happy. I know we got an extra snow day out of that, but we had to go. I think we had to stay in school one more extra day for that one. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
Well, Peter, obviously it made you extremely happy because you remembered all these many years later.
I know, right? I wish I was back there again. Like I said, we're getting old too fast, so it's just it's moving on. And I just like to enjoy all the aspects as far as weather goes. I like to experience really about anything, Rob. Again, if I could ever get out to the Midwest, I would love to chase. I love being out in the nor'easters. I love being behind the scenes. I just love being out in all the elements, even though I tell the people, stay in. You don't want to go outside in rough, stormy conditions because, it can be hazardous to your life. So you want to watch us from on TV or over the radio, so you get all the reports on what's going on, and you know that very well as well. So, all right.
Yes.
Big controversial. We had a talk the other night, you and I, about global warming, and
yes,
this is a big issue of mine, and I think I told you this when we spoke on the phone for over an hour. And I was telling you that I am a skeptic, but then you kind of reversed that theory in my head when you told me exactly what was going on. And I explained about the ice caps up in the Arctic and Antarctica, how there are more this year than the past years, and that they didn't melt, which would mean that the world isn't warming. But you're doing some kind of a project on this, so you can explain to the listeners what's going on as far as global warming?
Well, actually, the news report that used imagery, satellite imagery, actually took a winter image and called it a summer image. So they gave you the whole wrong story. They gave you the complete wrong story. The fact of the matter is there is less ice in the summertime, and leading scientists around the world still believe that the Arctic will be ice-free in the next decade or two.
Okay.
So that's really going to affect temperatures, jet stream, etc. During the summer period. So it is true. If you can look online at data from NASA. I know they have animations of sea ice changes over time, and they will actually show you the differences just looking at the last 20 years of satellite data. So, and the other thing, too, is that what's astounding is that although climate change has been politicized so that people on the conservative side don't believe it, people on the liberal side believe it almost too much. But what's the reality is what's in between. First of all, I've never met a politician that understands science.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So for it to be politicized is like really kind of crazy. What it is it's a mixture of things. The Earth goes through natural periods of warming and cooling. And we've all seen that. I mean, we've seen the Ice Age, we've seen the Little Ice Age back in the Middle Ages, and then we've seen it warm up. What's interesting and what scientific data has shown us is that although we're in a period of natural warming, a cycle of natural warming, all of the pollution that we have put in the air has exacerbated the rate of warming. So it's a compilation of a natural cycle plus man is really helping it faster. And that's what we're seeing. One of the things that I look at are tropical cyclones, hurricanes and typhoons and so forth. And although the jury is still out, for the most part, it appears, certainly since 2005, that storms have become less frequent but more intense. And we've seen a lot of major hurricanes and super typhoons to confirm that over the last 10 years.
Right.
So those are just two examples.
Okay. Volcanic eruptions, Iceland, volcanic eruptions around the world, the sun, radiation in the sky, up in space, all that. Does that all have to play with the global warming as well? Water temperatures. Are we seeing water temperatures warming now than we've seen in the past, say, 10 or 20 years?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes. The water temperatures appear to be warmer. We used infrared data, actually, by satellite to see that. Infrared data is basically tells us temperature. So scientists studying, I'm going to use tropical cyclones as a benchmark because that's what I'm used to.
Okay.
So scientists studying tropical cyclones use infrared data to determine how cold the coldest thunderstorm tops are, because the higher you go in the atmosphere, the colder it is. The higher the thunderstorm, typically the stronger the thunderstorm.
Right.
We also look at sea surface temperatures, and we can see sea surface temperatures have increased in warmth. And we can also look at sea surface height. There's a satellite called JASON-2 that looks at sea surface height. So that actually tells us when there's a developing El Nino, when the sea surface heights rise, or a developing La Nina, where the sea surface sea surface levels drop because the water cools. Cool water is more condensed.
Yeah.
So let me get back to your original question. Mm-hmm. And I forgot what it was. So remind me of what it was.
Okay. No, I might have forgot. No, let me go back. Question was, with the volcanic eruptions in Iceland and around the world, the radiation up in space, in the sky, and the warming water temperatures, does that all have to hint to our global warming?
Okay, yes. There are a number of factors that scientists look at. And those it depends on a number of factors, but for the most part, we found solar radiation I think it's about 1%, accounts for 1% of climate change on Earth, because the sun has been pretty steady, at least during the time that we populated the Earth.
Yep.
So, and the exception was, I believe, during the Little Ice Age. Volcanoes, however, play a much greater role in climate, especially in hemispheric climate. In 1991, when Mount Pinatubo erupted, it was so strong that it shot so much ash into the stratosphere. And upper-level winds carried that ash all around the northern hemisphere. So we had one of the coolest years on record up there because of that cooling.
Yep.
Because all of that ash blocked the incoming sunlight. So yes, volcanoes, if they're certainly strong enough to throw a lot of ash into the stratosphere, can certainly change the climate at least in the short term.
Yeah. As far as our well, if our magnetic field on Earth, let's say, started weakening, could that also inhibit a quicker warming of our planet as well?
That's actually a question I can't answer because I think we need to speak with a heliophysicist. That's kind of
Can we get
out of
them
my
on?
realm. Yes.
Let's call it a heliophysicist. Yes, that can happen. If it weakens, the rays will come in. No, I'm just really, I told you this. I'm a skeptic, and it's really hard to believe that our world's, warming because you and I both know, the world goes through a bunch of changes. We have climate changes. We go through decades with different kind of storms in 10, 20 years. The perfect storm in 91. We haven't seen one of them in a long time. If we go to the superstorm in 93, we don't normally get a big storm every year. It seems to come in cycles. 1938, Great New England Hurricane, that was in cycles. So it's just like, it's been a long time since we've had a storm like that in a cycle. So are the cycles actually attached to the global warming? As we get warmer, we'll start to see more of these cycles with more damaging, producing storms if we're in like a El Nino?
Well, that's another thing that's being researched right now by a lot of scientists. Certainly, we have found that the intensity of storms has increased. But in terms of like tropical cyclones, as I mentioned, there may not be as many, but they are stronger. And that's because, as we mentioned, too, the ocean, the sea surface temperatures are warmer. And tropical cyclones need at least sea surface temperatures of 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 26.6 degrees Celsius in order to be maintained. So, the warmer sea surface temperatures you have over a greater area, the stronger a storm can get over time, certainly.
Right. So
I can't speak to tornadoes, but certainly, if for everybody listening that's read the papers, it certainly seems like these tornadoes have been really strong over the last couple of years. When they hit, there may not be as many.
Right, correct. We've had a I'd say below average season for tornadoes, I would say, for 2014 season so far. I don't know if we're going to make time for that in November, say December, October, and we can have these kind of spring patterns set up in the late fall and early winter. We've seen that before, Rob.
Sure.
Because the weather patterns, it's crazy. It's very unpredictable. As far as long-range forecasting goes, I am not spectacularly great with long-range forecasting, so I don't like to get into long-range forecasting. But I'll see a long-range forecast computer model. I'll look at it like, okay, so they're calling for a really widespread severe weather outbreak out in the Midwest, and that's in 10 days out or something like that. I don't buy that, or 5 days, 6 days out. So it's really, for me, it's more like 2 or 3 day ahead forecast because everything can change. I get a phone call, I get a text message. Today I got a text message from a friend of mine. My daughter's getting married at 5 o'clock up in Plum Island. Pete, can you tell me if the rain's going to hold off? Well, I can't be 100% guaranteed if the rain's going to hold off. I mean, I'm doing my best. But believe it or not, the rain held off till about, I would say, 6 o'clock. So I think they got the wedding in. I'm hoping they got the wedding in.
I hope they credit you with that.
Well, that's another thing. I'm like, you're like the 6th or 7th person this morning that's asked me about events. Someone had a rally, a race mud thing where they go through all the obstacles. I said, yeah, no, it's going to be cool. Wear a sweatshirt. Then again, you're going to sweat because you're going through the tracks in the course. And then I've had more wedding calls, wedding texts. So I keep busy, and I'm sure you get the same thing. But going back to where we were, water temperatures, global warming. Can global warming also increase our oceans, per se? Ocean rises. Can oceans rise due to the global warming influence on the world?
Absolutely. We've actually seen oceans rise, and that is because what we mentioned at the top of the hour, and that the Arctic ice melt continues. So even in the wintertime, this is certainly not terrible, but glaciers are melting around the world at a tremendous rate, and there are photographs that are astounding that show ice coverage not more than 30 years ago that are totally ice-free.
Right.
So that water has to go somewhere, right?
No, it does, but you wouldn't think it would rise so quickly from what are we talking, these ice caps? I mean, icebergs, how high are they? 30 feet high? Are they 100, 200 yards wide, 300 yards wide, a mile wide? How big are these things that we're talking about?
Oh, they're massive.
So if one melted, could it flood a city? Let's say one was in a city. Could it flood a city?
That's hard to know. Everything depends on what size it is and how much water content is frozen in there. All I can tell you for sure with certainty is that I know federal agencies like NASA has satellites up there that can actually detect the thickness of sea ice.
Okay.
I think that the ISAT satellite did that, and I think they're launching ISAT 2 in the next year to continue doing that.
Yep.
I know that also that there are campaigns going on in the Antarctic and the Arctic to quantify climate change and ice and snow cover change.
Right.
So there's a lot of activity going on.
Would you go out there? I think we had that conversation, and I think your answer was...
No. No, I'm one of those guys who likes to sit and report it.
You wouldn't come back with any fur in your body. You'd be frozen,
exactly.
right? Oh,
yeah.
man. So, all right, there's one question. I said I was going to take questions till 8:30 or so or after, because I wanted to get a little bit of paranormal in as well. But I got a question from the chat room, and they want to know, Rob, is how will solar flare activity affect the weather? Does that affect the weather as far as warming goes on our planet, or can that affect the weather on our jet stream? Can that do anything that can knock a low pressure, high pressure off? I know it takes a lot to do that, so I don't think it does, right?
Yeah, it doesn't, and I think that's because we have the magnetosphere that surrounds the Earth. And what the magnetosphere does, to me, as I recall, it's more like a blanket that surrounds the Earth, and it basically lights up whenever we get solar flares. That's actually why we get auroras. We get excited particles that are over the poles. So that we're protected by that magnetosphere, and I think the ionosphere too. So I don't think it has an effect on the weather. Certainly, solar storms don't seem to have an effect on the weather, but they do certainly affect the satellites, as we know, that are out there. And they affect radio signals and TV signals and everything because a lot of them are now transmitted through satellite. So, I also know that whenever astronauts are in space, they have to go to a certain part of the International Space Station to protect them from any radiation. From that, that's something I learned over the last couple of years that. When we send people into space, they have to be totally protected from these storms.
Now,
interesting
radiation.
Stuff about.
Go ahead.
I said it's just interesting stuff about solar radiation, solar flares. They're very dangerous and they can be disruptive.
Yeah, they can knock out a power grid, and that would cause not global warming. That would cause global panic because we'd have no power. I did actually notice today, Rob, and last night that my GPS on my phone wasn't working too well. So I think it did kind of interfere with some GPS, but and I asked this question before. I asked this to, who was it? I think it was, I don't remember. Joe DeCalperi. I asked this to Joe. my buddy from the National Weather Service that came on a few shows ago. I asked him, is there any, can solar flare, actually no, it was Nick Howes in the UK, can solar flares have an influence on airplanes? Because, everything's run by computers and,
Sure.
all automatic. I mean, that would be devastating if that was the case. So they must have some kind of a safety switch in case there is a bad solar storm that wouldn't affect the way pilots fly their airplanes, aviation-wise, up in the air. Right?
Yeah, I don't know, and all I will say about that is that if there is a solar storm and I am on an aircraft, I'll be very nervous.
No, I would too. All right, switching things over. Let's go to the tropics. I've been watching a few things out in the Atlantic. We got Edouard. I think it's a tropical storm with 60-mile-an-hour winds. And the latest minimum price I saw was $9.95. The movement was northwest at 11 knots, so that's kind of concerning, but most likely it will curve out to sea. And then we have another disturbance that's, I'd say, probably about, 600 miles off of Africa, out in the middle Atlantic, or far west near the Cape Verde Islands. That the National Weather Service only has a 2% chance on that one developing. That's one I think we need to watch, as our jet stream might change in the next 10 days. And then the Gulf of Mexico also has a disturbance. So, is the Sahara dust now finally given up? I haven't got to look. I didn't look at the latest water vapor imagery. I should do that. But I'm trying to figure out, are our water temperatures so warm now that we could have a late peak season, say October instead?
Certainly the water temperatures are quite warm right now. And I wouldn't discount big storms in October at all. I think historically there has been a couple of big storms in October. Anything is possible. I mean, that's, after all, I always like to say to people, even though hurricane season runs until November 30th, we can still get them after that, because hurricane season doesn't follow a calendar.
True.
Yeah, so I certainly think that anything's possible, especially this year. It seems like the hurricane season in the Atlantic has been somewhat delayed.
Just like our summer was.
Yeah, like our summer was. Yep, exactly.
So what does that pose for the East Coast that you think? Because folks, I got to tell you, this guy, Rob, my guest, Rob Goutreau, is a science hurricane specialist. So he knows everything there is about hurricanes in the tropics. So what does that pose for the East Coast?
Well, I think you're overselling me, but thank you for your confidence.
Oh, okay.
What it tells us is that the conditions are still going to be in place for things to develop. I think back in 1954, Tropical Storm Hazel developed in early October, and that was in the Caribbean. And let's see if I can look it up here. And it paralleled the coast of Florida, and then it made landfall in southern North Carolina. And that was a pretty bad storm. It killed 95 people. It caused $281 million in damages, and they retired that storm. And that was October. I don't think it made landfall until somewhere like the 14th or 15th, something like that. So it was mid-October.
What would you give?
Yes, so anything's possible.
What would you give chances for a southern New England hit? Well, percentage-wise, say, through November. I get a lot of people that are asking me, what do you think the percentage is? And I'm telling them, look, I can't put numbers on it because hurricanes are very hard to predict, especially their tracks. Depending on if you have high pressure off, let's say out in Bermuda, you get the Bermuda High, you get the jet stream, you get the trough that rides up the coastline, you get the high pressure not over New England because that usually blocks us because the jet stream comes through New England and it ricochets it out to sea. More and more, we see that a lot. Always that curvature. But in the Far East, for some reason, the typhoons are always coming into Hong Kong, Japan, China, Guam, all the islands out there. So they're very vulnerable out there every year. they don't have a break out there in the Far East. Why does the Far East never really have a break? And they have one super typhoon after another. But here in the Atlantic, we always have them recurving.
Yeah, they sure do. I think in large part it's because of the ocean gyre, the way that the ocean moves in a large
streams?
way.
Okay,
yeah,
that was like a...
In the Atlantic, we move our ocean gyre, our circulation moves in clockwise stream. So what it does is when it goes around the coast of the East Coast, rather, when it goes from south to north, it actually curves like it's going from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So it curves out, which is why, which helps certainly. Plus we get all the fronts. I'm not certain about the ocean gyre there, but I do know that the bodies of water there are broken up more. Like there's the South China Sea, there's the East China Sea. The Philippine Sea, of course, is part of the Northwestern Pacific Ocean. I just think that they may be shallower seas, which means that because they're more shallow, they're more prone to warm up faster.
Right. So they have warmer waters. Well, what about let's go to the Pacific. It's pretty active out there in the Pacific, which is amazing. I mean, it hasn't really been quiet out in the Pacific. I think the Pacific was a little bit quiet last year, but this year it seems like we got Odile, which is off of pretty close to the Bahamas, southern Bahamas, the southern Baja. If it was close to the Bahamas, I'd be really concerned right now up here in New England. And then they got Tropical Depression 16E out there as well, and then another disturbance that has about a 20% chance off the coast of Guatemala. Why is it so active over there? Usually the waters are cooler off the Baja. They don't get into the Gulf Stream water temperatures that we have over here on the East Coast, so they're doing really a lot well. They get more activity out there besides us, and we seem to be in a neutral phase right now. We're not really in the El Nino. We're not really in the La Nina. So is that the case?
I actually asked an oceanographer about that. An oceanographer that works at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. And because there has been a developing El Nino for the last 6 to 9 months, the water temperatures have been warmer than normal. And that's the reason why a lot of these systems are developing out there. We're still in a holding pattern in terms of El Nino development. But just because it's not an official El Nino, it doesn't mean that the sea surface temperatures aren't going to spit out tropical cyclones when the winds cooperate. So that's why we've seen 16 tropical cyclones this year in the Eastern Pacific. And by the way, I just found out that 16E is a tiny little weak storm, certainly in comparison to Odile. I think it's 1/12 the size of Odile. Yeah. And in fact, Odile is so big that 16E is about to be sucked into Odile and basically become a trough of low pressure. Yeah, so it's not going to be around. I think more after tomorrow. You can write 16E off, I think.
She's going to get sucked into Odile, and it only has 100-mile-an-hour wind sustained. I got a good question for you as far as hurricanes go. When we had Hurricane Bob, I was living up here in Cape Ann.
91?
The wind, yeah, 91. The winds were sustained, I believe, at 115 miles an hour, and they were gusts to 130, supposedly. But, again, coming up into New England, it's really hard to get some of these winds to reach all the way to the surface. You have to be exactly on the water with less friction for these winds to actually come down. Or they come down in the heavy rain bands. So when they say you're going to get 100-mile-an-hour winds, it's not guaranteed. NOAA is picking that up, which is great. Usually it's on the northeast or eastern quadrant of the hurricane where the worst is anyways. And that's good for me because I'm in northeast Massachusetts. So it comes up from the south to up the coast. We're right in ground zero. You know what I mean? If it doesn't weaken and fall apart. But with that being said, those winds, sustained winds, Do they actually get to that sustained level, or is it just a brief sustainment? Because I know a hurricane can last for more than 3 hours, depending on its movement. But again, up here in New England, we're favorable to fast-moving tropical systems that come up the coastline. They reach our latitude, and they hit our jet stream, and they fly up the coast. So with that being said, Rob, if we were going to get a hurricane up here in Cape Ann, it was making landfall, let's say, down in or it was making landfall on Long Island, eastern tip of Long Island, coming up through Buzzards Bay, beeline for Cape Ann, and we're on the northeastern side. Let's say winds are sustained at 100. Would we get those sustained winds at 100? And if we did, how long do you think they would last for? If it's, let's say the storm's moving at 25 miles per hour.
Well, certainly it depends on where the center goes, but yeah, as you mentioned, they would be in the northeastern quadrant of the storm. That's the strongest quadrant. Okay. So, certainly if the eye goes over Cape Ann, then you would experience them. Okay. But anywhere east of the eye would experience it.
Right.
That's usually what I caution.
Yeah, anywhere east of the eye would experience it, and west of the eye would be mostly at the heavy rain. Yeah. Tropical storm force. So how far can tropical storm force winds extend out with the system? I guess it depends on the severity of it.
It depends on the severity. One thing that's important for folks to know is that when a hurricane weakens to a tropical storm, the danger certainly isn't over. In fact, when hurricanes start to weaken, the storm expands. So you can have a tropical storm. You can have tropical storm force winds up to 800 miles from one end to the other.
Oh shit!
That's a long way.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, other times you can get hurricane force winds in a very, very compact area, like 30 miles from the center.
Yep.
But they expand as they weaken. So folks should really be aware of that.
Okay. A lot of people want to know what the upcoming winter is going to be for New England. We had a really nasty, destructive storm in 2010 or 2012, I forget. It was February 25th, 26th, where we were sustained. There was a nor'easter. It was coming out. It was going out to sea. It retrograded. And in the center, I'm watching. It looks like a donut on the radar. And I'm going over data, and I'm looking at this thing, and it came in and went just southwest of Cape Ann, right over Boston, and then it did a loop. It went down towards Cape Cod. But as it did that, Rob, there was no precipitation in the Atlantic around that northeastern side, and the pressure was dropping. It went from it was bombogenesis easily. It went from I believe it was 983 to 966 millibars or 969 millibars. So it was bombing. It wasn't a crazy bomb, but we had a high pressure to our north. We had that coming down to our southwest over Cape Ann. So that northeastern side of that donut went right over us, and I'm saying to myself, geez, 7:30, we're going to be blowing a hurricane here. And nobody was picking that up except for myself, which they all credited me, so I felt good about that. But we started out gusting 35, 40, and then we were sustained 50, 60, and then we went sustained 75, 80. And this was consistent for about 2 to 3 hours. We were sustained 75 to 80 miles an hour. And then at 10 o'clock, just when you think it's going to wind down, it seems like we had a gravity wave come down because the trees just went whoosh. I mean, it was like a big wave coming out of the sky and taking those trees and really just blowing those tops. We hit 110 mile an hour gust, and it blew off the roofs of the hotel on the back shore on Atlantic Road. Yeah, I told my friend Matt Noyce at NECN that you need to get a crew down here and be on Atlantic Road and report where I'm going to be reporting from because those roofs are going to blow off the hotel. And they didn't bring one down, but the next day the roofs were blown off both those hotels. And we had it was like a war zone. There were trees falling down. It was thump, thump, thump all night. Houses were shaking. Power flashes. It was living through a Category 2 or 3 hurricane, Rob. That's how intense
Wow.
that storm was. Yeah. And it actually brought warmer air off the Atlantic Ocean. Inland areas got a lot of snow from that. We ended up with about 2 inches of slush, but we warmed up to 56 degrees that night, and the winds just were a horror show. And that's one thing people in the Boston area don't really understand, meteorologists, because they don't live out here on the island. We experience so much different weather than they do in the city, having water on all three sides of a peninsula, and the northeast wind is our worst wind. So, yeah, that was pretty wild. I really I documented that storm. I really liked it. So I'm thinking about writing a book on it, too. I called it the, what did I call it? The Wind Monster.
Oh, wow.
Call it the Wind Monster. So that was pretty cool. Well, Rob, you also have another hobby specialty of yours that you really enjoy doing. You're a ghost medium, so you can. Do you actually? Well, before we get to that, why don't you tell the listeners what it is that you do with that, if you would, and that you have a few books out there. I was going to share. I think I shared earlier, but you're welcome to share too.
Okay. I guess right around the same time that I decided I wanted to get into weather, I also found out that I had the ability to get messages from people who passed. And, you know, being a scientist, it's always kind of a conflict, but not so much anymore for me because I've been able to explain a lot of things with science.
Right.
So over time I developed that ability and refined it, and I always have to prove the messages I get. I belong to a team of investigators. We call the Inspired Ghost Tracking Team, and it's in the Mid-Atlantic. And we go on investigations to private residences who have paranormal problems, and then we try to basically cross the ghosts over, clear them out. Since I joined that group, I am astounded by the number of people who have entities in their homes. We went into one home this afternoon, as a matter of fact, at 1 o'clock, and there were 5 different entities in the house that we could detect. And I was able to figure out, I think we were able to figure out the identities of 3 of them, which is kind of unnerving. Just by the messages, myself and another medium walked in there, and we were able to figure out who they were. So I got into the paranormal because of my ability, and I wrote these 3 books based on my understanding of what happens after we die, including some science, and to explain to people that our personalities and our memories combine with the physical energies that are in our bodies, and we make a conscious choice either to stay here on Earth as a ghost, what I call a ghost, or we cross over into heaven or the universe or whatever as a spirit. Okay. So I make a distinction between the two because everybody I've talked to in the paranormal world does not distinguish between the two. They're the same kind of entity, but it's about location. So, right. You know, a realtor, they can tell you all about it. So that's why I wrote my first book, Ghosts and Spirits, and it's all based on energy. You know, as you know, when you try to detect an entity, you use an electromagnetic field detector. We check temperature. Spirits can play with electricity.
Right.
They can manipulate it because they are electricity. They're basically energy. So some of the things that I explain in the books, too, are how spirits and ghosts communicate with us, how to look for signs, how to understand what they're saying, etc. And I do provide some scientific explanations, like I'll give you one, for instance. Why temperature changes can indicate paranormal activity. And this goes back to weather, kind of. Fast-moving molecules of air are warm air. Slow-moving molecules of air are cooler air. So what happens when paranormal, when a ghost, for instance, an earthbound ghost, wants to manifest and give a message, it actually takes the energy out of those fast-moving molecules of air. It takes the energy of the motion and slows them down. So what it does is it cools them off. It creates a cold spot, if you will.
Right.
So that's some of the science behind what we used to call the paranormal. I just call it ghosts and spirits. So I wrote 3 books. Ghosts and Spirits is my first one. Lessons Learned from Talking to the Dead is my second one. That's the one that will tell you. It basically answers all your questions about the paranormal. Everything I've ever been asked, I share. I have a chapter on, and I share personal experiences to answer those questions. Like, what's the significance of ashes? Do we go to our own wakes and funerals?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do we go to our own wakes and funerals?
We sure do.
I'm always wondering who's going to show up at my funeral. Well, I don't want one very, in the short term. But I just wonder if
yeah,
show up. Like that son of a blank, she showed up to my funeral, you bitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, my parents passed. My dad passed in 2008. My mother just passed this past December. And both of them gave me clear signs and indications that they were at their own services. And both of them, my dad helped me prove to my mother when he passed that he was right there during the services. And
wow.
And he did that through the indication of a handkerchief.
Wow. Spooky.
It is spooky, but you know what? On the other hand, it was really comforting, Peter, because my mom was almost inconsolable.
Yeah.
And it turned out she has the ability that I had, and my grandfather had it.
Right.
And it is inherited.
So you were born with it.
Yeah, but others can learn it. So my mother understood what I was telling her, and she was comforted by that fact. As a matter of fact, after my dad passed, my mother would call me and she'd say, he's playing with the hall light again. And she said, I've had 3 electricians out here to look at it, and there's nothing wrong with it. So of course there's nothing wrong with it. He just wants to let you know he's around.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. He was watching out for her.
Absolutely.
So,
and
just letting
my
her know
latest book,
he was there.
What's that?
And he was just letting her know that he was there, letting her know that he was there.
That's right, and a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
So I covered all the ways that people on the other side and pets on the other side will give us messages. And Pets in the Afterlife is my newest book. I explain how dogs, I use dogs as a benchmark because I work with rescues and have dogs of my own.
Right.
All the different levels of learning, scientific studies about using MRIs to prove that dogs have the same emotional level as people.
Very smart, very bright, yeah.
Yeah. So that will give people hope who have pets that have passed. And I know 2 of my dogs have given me a lot of signs after they passed.
Right. You had a tragic passing of one of your dogs, correct?
Yes, my first dog. He was a puppy. His name was Buzz. He was a Weimaraner, and his leash opened when I was walking him one day, and he was killed in front of me by a speeding car.
Oh, that's awful.
But yeah, you never get over it. You never get over it. But Buzz,
you don't.
He became the world's best canine communicator, and that dog, right from the get-go, he was moving things. He was giving me musical messages. He was appearing to others. He was leading me to people that had a Weimaraner, and Weimaraners are not very common.
Right. Yeah.
He led me to a guy walking a Weimaraner in Puerto Rico when I was on vacation, and it turned out that it was 4 years after he died, and it turned out to be the anniversary of the date he died. And
wow.
When I saw that Weimaraner, I heard him say in my head, "Dad, I'm still here 4 years later. I just want you to know that."
Wow. That's breathtaking. Wow, that's pretty intense. I mean, I always feel that dogs are always they're a family member. Any kind of pet's a family member, you know.
Even a mother-in-law is a family member. Just kidding.
Oh God.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So Rob, tell me, we got 10 minutes left in the show. You're going to be up in Wilmington, Mass on September 20th, correct?
I actually am. I am coming back to the homestead. I will be at the New England Pet Expo at Shriners Auditorium in Wilmington, and people can bring their pets too, and it's free.
Very good.
So,
very good. And the time for that is?
It's from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that's a Saturday, correct?
It's a Saturday, and actually I'm giving a talk at 1:15 about how pets communicate from the other side.
Okay.
And I'll have my book, Pets in the Afterlife. And I'll have a couple copies of the other ones, too, if anybody's interested.
Oh, cool.
But,
yeah, so you guys all want to come up there and check that out. I'm definitely going to be there. I'm going to bring my daughter. So you'll get to see us both and hopefully get a signed book from you. That would be great. And, enjoy the... What else is going on up there? Are there other things going on, or is it just you?
That's the only thing I have planned.
Yep.
Of course, I get to see some of my family members I haven't seen in a while, so it's all good.
That's awesome.
But for people who are down in Pennsylvania, I'll be at the Wolfstock Dog event September 28th in Harrisburg, and then I'm flying to New York for a dog rescue benefit to do a talk and book signing at the Adirondack Save and Stray Rescue in Corinth, New York, which is near Albany. So I'm going to be all over the place like an epidemic.
So you're going to be a busy guy.
Yeah.
You're going on tour? You got your whole entourage going with you, or are you traveling alone?
No, the kids have to stay home with my partner, so you have to take care of them.
Yeah.
So it's just me.
Cool.
But I'd love to meet everybody and talk about pets and talk about spirits and ghosts. Yeah,
I mean, I'd love to have you again, and we can do another hour of just talking spirits and ghosts. I mean, you've been on a shitload of investigations, and I don't think you've been to the Lizzie Borden house yet. But if you want to do a shout-out or plug where people can find you or follow you at, be my guest to let all the listeners know.
Well, thanks, Peter. I appreciate that. They can find me on Facebook, certainly. All they have to do is type in Rob Guttrow, author medium. My blog is a really good place to find me. It's kind of a long title, but it's Ghosts and Spirits Insights.blogspot.com. Ghosts and Spirits Insights is my first book title. And my books are all on Amazon.com, so just type in GUTRO and you get all my books up there. And I have to tell you, this month has been pretty cool because all three of them have become Amazon bestsellers in the paranormal. I was really surprised and flattered. So thank you.
Awesome. And do you have a weather page where people can go find you at?
I do not have a weather page. Nope.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I just whenever people want forecasts, of course they call me and I'll tell them what I think. But
okay.
I keep that. I did. My research is out there elsewhere. But
okay.
But I'll be happy to talk to you about weather anytime.
There you go. So, you check that out. Come out to Wilmington. Check out Rob Guttrow and check out his books, Pets in the Afterlife, and he'll probably have his other two books as well, Ghosts and Spirits, Lessons Learned from Talking to the Dead. Did anything ever freak you out before I let you go as far as talking to someone from the dead? And one other thing, Rob, is when you're in an investigation, I know you say they're all spirits, but have you ever come in contact with something that's not from this world, as I don't like to say it, but, a demon?
I like to think of demons as, otherworldly life. And I like to think of dark entities as mother-in-laws. But It is what it is. Yeah, I have encountered a dark entity, and
you have or you haven't?
And I have.
Yeah.
It's pretty unnerving, but for the most part, everything I've encountered is human or animal.
Have you ever been on an investigation where you're in a house and it's really quiet, but then the lights start going off, the doors are slamming, you hear voices, whispers saying, no, go away? And I'm talking real live, active haunted house. I mean, I've really never been on an investigation like that, where I have bumped into an apparition at the Victorian Mansion where I was 3-4 feet in front of, it was in front of me and it had black beady eyes, and it looked like something out of, I don't know, Raiders of the Lost Ark, out of the Holy Grail, and it scared the crap out of me, and I jumped in the air, and I landed on my team members, MJ and Dom Ghost Hunter, and the video camera fell, and he caught it and break. That really scared the crap out of me, but I've never really witnessed a really active home or investigation where it's just constant. Does that really happen, or is this just what we want to hear? I've never seen it, but, I wouldn't mind being in it.
I've never encountered anything like that either, to be honest with you. I've encountered houses like the one I did today where there are multiple entities in there, but nothing that malevolent by any degree.
That'd be more like a poltergeist.
Yeah, I mean, I went on one investigation where there was a murder of a young man in Baltimore, and when I went in the backyard, I realized that he was dismembered and he was buried in different parts of the backyard. And then he showed up in a photograph standing next to me in the upstairs of the house as a dark shadow.
Wow.
So that kind of freaks you out.
Well, Rob, listen, I want to thank you so much for coming on my show tonight. If you ever get the opportunity, I'd love to have you back, hopefully this winter, if that would be okay with you. As long as you're not busy. I don't want to get in between your busy schedule. Quickly before we go.
Never too busy for you.
Oh, thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. I really so appreciate you coming on. You were a great guest tonight. A lot of people were asking about you. And I'm sure you're going to have a big showing up in Wilmington on the 20th of September. And again, that's from 10 to 6 p.m. at the Shriners. What building was it?
Shriners Auditorium.
Shriners Auditorium, okay.
In Wilmington, yeah.
Okay. And then, folks, that's right off of, I believe it's off of 93 or 95. I don't know. I got to get my routes fixed. But quickly, before we go, give us a very quick what you think outlook for 2014-2015 winter is in 2 sentences. Make it 1 sentence.
The cold. No, well, all I'll say is that I don't really think that we're going to have the same kind of polar outbreaks that we had last year. But again, nothing can be certain. And for the folks that remember how cold it was last winter, as I do, just know that Russia had one of the warmest winters they've ever had, and that's because of the movement of the high pressure area over the Arctic. So.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to hold you to that, Rob. Listen, it's been great chatting with you tonight, buddy. Stay safe. Have fun. I'll see you next Saturday in Wilmington.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Have a good night.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was Rob Goutreau, my guest. So coming up next week, I have Quincy Vogel on from 8 to 8:30. We're going to talk storm chasing. Quincy travels the country, tornado chaser, severe storm chaser, meteorologist, so it's going to be fun. And then from 8:30 to 9, I'm going to have Joni Mahan. She wrote the book Bones in the Basement, and believe it or not, I am in that book. So if you get that book and you get it signed by her, she'll tell you about her signings, where and when. We'll get the dates, but I am in that book, and there's a chapter on it of Mass Ghost Hunters Paranormal Society. I was on that team for a while. I love them. Mark Arvilla, Lauren Sheridan, Mike Gallant. Anyways, I'm in there. Check it out. So I will see you. I will see you next Saturday at 8 p.m. on Wicked Weather. For now, I'm Peter Lavasco, your Wicked Weatherman. Have a great and lovely weekend. Bye-bye.